Last week on the T-Rex Labs channel, we talked about new developments with IVAS and some fun experiments we have been doing with smart glasses and various displays. But one of the things that we didn't touch on is the value for that in a training environment. So we're going to cover that in today's podcast, and we have a special guest with a lot of experience in this area. But he's going to point out that there is a significant overlap between the equipment for training and the equipment that you would end up using in the field. Welcome back to another T-Rex Talk, and today I'd like to introduce a friend of mine, Gage, who is a part of the Overmatch software and hardware training solution. So we've known each other for a while, Gabe. You came out to the T-Rex shop, you demoed your stuff. I can't remember if we did a giant YouTube video about it or if we just posted kind of short social media clips, but your augmented reality training system is incredibly impressive. It's probably the most flexible, sophisticated system that I have seen, and you guys were very kind to let us play with it. But I'd like to talk to you more about just kind of where things are at in the space, how things have developed, and then of course, earlier this week, there was augmented reality news when Anduril got involved with or took over or is a significant partner now in the IVAS program. I think we're still waiting to see how that actually shakes out. But a lot of augmented reality news this week. So anyway, welcome to the show. Let's talk.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I hope I can share some useful information and context around augmented reality or virtual reality as a technology space, and as well as how it applies to military training and operational spaces.
Yeah. Now, there's probably some stuff that you can't talk about because of customers you have, contracts you have, associations you have. So, yeah, feel free to just wave away certain questions. Yeah. But how long has Overmatch been doing stuff?
So we started about 5 years ago. And a lot of us come from the game industry. A lot of us spent 20 plus years as software engineers in the game industry, working on all the various simulation and rendering and network technologies for that. And then, it was actually about 5 years ago that they announced the first version of IVAS, and that got a lot of us interested in the space. And, Overmatch is, big picture, we're an XR spatial computing, solutions provider. But more specifically, we are focused on military, law enforcement, and defense style contracts. So yes, there are some clients and some contracts that we don't talk about publicly, but there are, as you've seen, we have some products that are available for purchase that we can show and demonstrate. And yeah, I appreciate your kind words on the system. We worked hard on that.
Yeah. So the coolest thing about it, I think you're using a number of off-the-shelf parts. But the coolest thing about it was it didn't take a very long time. You guys came in and you mapped the upstairs area of one of the T-Rex buildings. And then when we put on the backpack and the goggles, we could see those video game characters, fully 3D rendered, real-time AI characters that were staged in rooms in our office. We're able to go through and clear and as teams. It wasn't a solo thing, but multiple guys could be clearing that upstairs area and see each other because the glasses are transparent, but also see the opposing force that are entirely virtual through doors, through windows. So yeah, it was. I won't say that it was a bug-free environment because we had metal walls, we had some slightly janky stuff going on that I think messed with your equipment a little bit here and there.
Like I said, the technology has a long way to go.
But it was functional. I mean, the bugs were there, but the bugs were easily worked around. So yeah.
Right. There's it's just like going back and looking at the generation or the evolution of any technology. To get to the iPhone 14, you had to have the iPhone 1, and that wasn't the best device. But one of my favorite parts about this job is that we demonstrate this technology a lot. We take it around the world, and we'll put our headset on someone's head. And everybody's seen a VR headset at this point. Everybody's experienced VR at this point. But when we put our headset on, we often get the reaction that you talked about. The number one thing people say to us is like, wow, I didn't know the technology was at this level. And what they're really seeing is they're seeing the harmonization of a lot of technologies that have sort of achieved a good enough status. And when you bring them all together, you create something that's greater than the sum of its parts. And that's what we enjoy doing. I think pursuant to the, or relevant to the conversation we're having here, there are a lot of different technologies that have to work together to make that experience plausible. The brain is a finicky customer, right? The brain, we're trying to trick your brain into believing and making the technology invisible and believing that something is happening there that isn't.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Some of the most impressive stuff that you were doing is probably relatively easy. Like a lot of the wow factor probably came from stuff that was relatively simple to do inside the goggles, seeing the characters, seeing them track as you move the head. That was really impressive, but also kind of what those goggles were meant to do. And then some of the other stuff that I'm sure was much more challenging, but you don't really think about it, is accurate weapon tracking and actually being able to calculate hits and misses. That was not something that any of us were thinking about, but I think that was a complex problem to solve, because
we can
it's
talk about the industry as
the tracking part.
Yeah, so there's a lot of technologies that don't seem obvious. And again, like you started this video by talking about, the sort of glasses look, augmented reality devices, and what those really are. Those are transparent displays, and they can present something in front of you. It generally just moves wherever you move your head. That's one of the technologies that is necessary. Obviously, a transparent display for AR. But there's a lot of others. And so, like, to get into the tracking, when we got into this, we were hoping, it's like, hey, surely there's an off-the-shelf tracking solution that's really precise. It seems like there should be. As it turns out, there's not. And a lot of the stuff you've seen in VR and in other places, when you close out the world and you're not having to marry virtual objects with real-world objects, you can get away with a little. But when you're doing firearms training, and especially when you're tracking something that's very close to your body but projecting out where it's actually pointed, that's very far away, you have to be extremely precise. So yeah, we did have to develop a proprietary tracking system that is optically based. We looked at a lot of technologies, IMUs and other things. But one thing I should say about the product that you're talking about, it's called FATS-AR. We develop it with our partner IVAS Training Solutions. It is designed to be portable. It is designed to be inside out. So the use case for that product is that you can stick some simulated weapons and our kit in a couple hard-sided Pelican cases, fly it anywhere in the world, and be up in training within an hour. You can't have outside-in tracking technology. You can't, set up cameras and modify the environment. Think about like training in a school or in a government building or in a naval vessel. There's a lot of restrictions that come with that. So, we have to solve these problems, on a completely body-worn, portable solution. So yes, tracking is one of the difficult technologies that's not readily available.
Yeah, and like you said, when you're doing video game stuff, and you're off by a few degrees, or you're off by a few centimeters, like that's, either the game can compensate for that, or like you said, if you're in a full VR solution, you can be off and you'll just automatically kind of correct as in the virtual world. But we were taking, along that long hallway up on the mezzanine there, we were taking some pretty long shots where a half a degree off on your bore axis would have been wildly different. And we were using red dot optics that were zeroed, that were clear, that were accurate. We wanted to see point of impact where the red dot was, just like on a real firearm. So your margin for error on such a long hallway there is extremely small.
Yeah, and I have good news. What we showed you, I think it was 2 years ago, it might have been.
Yes,
That's a long time ago. So we're about to launch our Gen 2 hardware here coming up late March, early April. And the Gen 2 hardware is orders of magnitude more robust, more accurate, easier to set up, a lot less sort of, AR/VR sort of friction. yeah, it's a much better system overall. Look forward to showing it to you.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. Is there anything else that you think the T-Rex viewers would find particularly interesting, but you'd still be allowed to talk about? Because in addition to solving all these technical problems and having insight into the game world, the VR world, the AR world, you're now connecting with law enforcement and military, and some of that's tactical requirements, but I'm sure you're also bumping into some interesting bureaucratic kind of stuff.
God, yeah. Yeah, so that's a common theme, right? Again, like I said, what I enjoy about the job is putting the technology on people and seeing their reaction of, oh, I didn't know this was possible. But when you're working with some of our customers, they don't want, it's hard to educate the customer on what is possible so that they write the requirements for what can be as opposed to what they're imagining.
Right.
And sort of one,
or what they've been doing for 20 years.
Exactly. So like, I think, you're training military people to shoot, and that could be from the first time recruit that you're putting a gun in his hand for the first times to somebody who's much more advanced and you're teaching more advanced tactics. So of course the Army trains on paper. They shoot paper because that's easy and replicatable. And then they want to see if they can use an augmented reality or virtual reality technology to make their training better. But of course, we can do a lot of things in this technology. We can have them train against actually, semi-intelligent opposing forces. We can have them conduct much more realistic exercises in terms of dealing with the opposing force. But of course, when they write the requirements, they just want you to shoot virtual cardboard so they can see if it's just like, the real thing. And it will take some time.
The real thing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, which is what they do right now. So we do a lot of simulating the ranges that they shoot on right now. And it will take some time before the comfort level develops to have the people who write the requirements understand. It's like, hey, there is more that you can do. There's new types of training that you can do that will make your soldiers more effective and safer. And it's just, I'm happy right now. The industry's in a good place. It seems like we're getting that momentum, and you can see as the programs are coming out, they're kind of broadening the spectrum of what they're looking for. And that's really good for a company like us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that there are, once there is a better understanding of that, all kinds of fascinating things. Like I have a little bit of experience with simunitions, and then more experience messing around with airsoft. And a while back, like anytime we were going to do renovations on a house, we would do some airsoft inside of the house before redoing the drywall. And that's fine because drywall is pretty easy to redo. Like you can do stuff with some of these different things, but there are locations where it's not okay to use simunitions, but it would be really valuable to get some reps in the actual place and not a mock-up. So I'm thinking of sensitive infrastructure kind of places where your training solution is ideal because it is entirely virtual, but you can do it all in the real place. There's no modifications to the structures, there's no modification to the electronics, there's no projectiles whatsoever. Like the most sensitive place you can imagine where you're not allowed to do training, you guys could do training in there, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, that is a key differentiator of our product, and that appeals to a great deal of customers. And you mentioned the other modes of training, right? Like obviously, we don't expect VR or augmented reality training to replace live fire training. But the fact is that simunition, as great as it is, there's a lot of logistical complexity around that, safety issues. Environmental issues. Obviously, you can't go destroy, the library with your simunition. So it doesn't happen as much as it should, right? And so that's where a really high fidelity training application like what we provide, you can just do it more. You can get more reps. You can have broader training. If you're looking at law enforcement or even military to an extent, but especially law enforcement, agencies don't have the budget to do all of the training whenever they want to do in all the scenarios they want.
Sure.
It's technologies like this allow more training to happen. They don't displace those other things. In some sense they can, but it's not, the end all be all. It's just something that can augment their training regimen and make their cadets or their soldiers more effective. Especially if you spend time on a VR or AR system before you go to the range, and it's a good system that'll have effective skills transfer, you actually get a lot better training value when you're doing the live fire work, because you kind of work through all the issues in the training with the simulated weapons first.
Yeah. Well, there's another component to this too, which I'm not sure how much you want to talk about, but we just did a video talking about some digital glasses, and the transparent displays have come a long way, and they're actually relatively effective. It's only one part of the puzzle, but even though your product is a training product, you have to do what you're doing well. You have all of the pieces of the puzzle for something that you would actually use in the field as well. Something that is effective and accurate and doesn't require a huge amount of infrastructure for augmented reality training is going to be exactly the same pieces of the puzzle. Maybe it needs to be more rugged to be used in the field, but it's the exact same technological problems to solve to have augmented reality stuff in the field, giving you data on what friendly forces are doing, what enemy forces are doing, what projectiles are, the cone of fire is, that kind of stuff. So
inevitably going to reshape operational capabilities.
Yeah,
right? It's more broadly deployed in training context right now, but there's a pretty good consensus that the spatial computing system, the XR universe, is going to be the world and the user interface through which warfighting combat is done.
Yeah. And so in the training space, you're butting heads occasionally with people who would rather do cardboard targets than actual simulated OPFOR. How many more hurdles do you have to overcome before you can?
Well,
there's technological hurdles, and then there's inertia.
I think we're there. I think you've seen kind of a pause. I feel like the Army's been there for a while. They just haven't known how to get there and who to get there with. But you can see that there is a new type of defense contractor getting more and more traction. It's the people like us and the people like Anduril who develop the technology and then show the end user, this is what you were supposed to ask for when you wrote the requirements. And we're much more agile. We iterate quickly, and we use more accessible technologies. So, it's not like, we have to go to a black box for 7 years and come out the other end with something that's already obsolete. So I feel the momentum already happening. I think that the customer is now asking for the right types of things. So I think you're going to see those operational augmentations start to be rolled out right now. And in fact, you can say in the Ukraine that they are. If you look at how they're actually conducting the drone warfare, they're all wearing VR headsets. The FPV drone is,
it's true,
shaping the battle space. So it's already, I think that opened a lot of people's eyes about, how quickly we need to be adapting to how the threats and fighting is actually changing.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a specific type of defense contractor, something like Anduril, a company like Anduril, a company like Overmatch. What is the difference? That kind of defense contractor versus the primes versus the old guard. What are some of the differences there?
We find ourselves trying to break into the space that we have to show the technology and the capability before we win the program, which is not, I would say, the traditional way of doing it, but it is the more satisfying way, because you can't write the requirements in the front end and then have like a 10-year execution cycle and think you're going to end up with the exact right product. It takes a lot of iteration. And so there are companies now that do feel like if we show up with the right technology and the right capability, that we can break into that space. And I think smaller companies and staying, I don't want to say COTS, but near COTS, to show that, hey, there are these, this is what our peers, this is what our adversaries are doing. They're taking off-the-shelf drones and they're reshaping the battlefield with them. And, we have to be that agile. I think that's, I guess, the difference is the agility. You have to be a highly agile company that responds to change quickly.
Yeah, there was I've just forgotten his name, but he's one of the professors at Stanford, and he has a group called the Gordian Knot Center, and basically he has tracked a lot of military programs that we've done here in the States, and the average delivery time for DoD contracts is unbelievably long. Like the just sheer amount of time it takes from concept to delivery is huge. And he made the very uncomfortable point a few years ago that as the war in Ukraine broke out and people were looking at the plucky Ukrainians grabbing stuff off the shelf and using it to fight the superpower, people were like, yes, that's us. Ukraine is us. That's how we operate. And he was like, oh, no, 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 no. We have stuff in our military stockpiles that's older than the stuff that the Russians are pulling out. We are slower to adapt to things than we're seeing the Russians be adaptable. And if you look at the two sides here, the plucky underdogs and the big, slow, stuck in the past crowd, don't be annoyed or offended when I point out that we are more stuck in the past than Russia is in many ways. And anybody that we're fighting in the future is going to be more in Ukraine's position where they're grabbing stuff off the shelf and they're adapting and are more
like
adaptable.
That awareness is spreading, and people on our side understand the urgency that we need to move and innovate faster. And it's just reality. Large companies, they can't move as quickly as a smaller, more agile company, especially when everybody self-selects into it. At our company, everybody has self-selected that they want this to be specifically their career, XR, military, and defense technologies. Whereas at a larger company, who are people who have been there for a long time, you may not have enough people, or it may be harder to group and free up the people who have selected into that career path.
Yeah. So for your company, or maybe just XR specifically, what are some of the bottlenecks? There's so many different pieces of the puzzle. There's the computing power, there's the display hardware. Is it the spatial and tracking hurdles? Is that kind of the hardest nut to crack still?
Well, let's jump ahead, right? Like today we have this distinction between augmented reality and virtual reality, and they both have their place today. Mm-hmm. But if we jump to when the technology is mature, the mature version of this technology will be able to recreate the world that you're in real time, extremely accurately, and layer in information from other sensors and other systems and give you just this idealized version of the world. And in that case, there's really no distinction between augmented reality and virtual reality, because everybody's going to want the recreated world, and it's going to be better than the world that you see with your own eyes. So I think that's where we're going. And there's a lot of different pillars that need to get better to get there. So obviously the displays are pretty good, but the field of view, the focal distance. So, your brain isn't happy when it sees, something that's supposed to be 2 meters away and something that's supposed to be 100 meters away, and they're on the same plane, and your eyeballs are focused on the same plane. Your brain is not happy with that. So there's obviously a lot that could happen just on displays. But displays are pretty good right now. And you'll see that in the near future headsets, that they're extremely good. The second one is mapping the world. Right now we map the world in real time-ish, but most scenarios are you actually do a mapping pass. So you do like a really good quality. That's when our system set up. We take 15, 20 minutes, do a good pass of the world, and then use that for the simulation. But it's not updating at 120 hertz like we want it to. So obviously speeding up mapping and doing it in real time is an improvement from where we're at right now. Then positioning the headset. It's pretty good right now, but the headset has to figure out where it is in that map. It's pretty good. It can get better. Eye tracking is one of the ones that's missing from a lot of solutions. If you really want the virtual content to really be drawn correctly where it's supposed to be as you move around, you need cameras on the eyes. You need to be positioning and factoring that into your calculations. The Magic Leap headset does that. They have 2 cameras per eye, and that really helps out with that. Many headsets don't have that right now. The other one, like we talked about, is object tracking. Whether it's your hands or the tools you're using, right now our technology, because we need it to be extremely quick, very low latency, and very, very precise. We use optical techniques that broadcast, IR light at you for triangulation. Obviously, we want that to be completely passive, and we can get there with computer vision. But that goes back to the on-body compute. Need a lot more compute. Another technology, occlusion. The screen is right in front of your eye. If you're doing, where you're passing light through from the real world, and you're not recreating the entire scene, then you need to be able to occlude the objects that are in the real world between you and the rendered data. Real-time depth tracking. Again, like I want to know where my hands are. I want to know exactly where things are in front of me.
Yeah.
So all of these technologies all need to rise up, and they are. And I think what you're going to see is near future headsets are going to take a substantial leap forward.
Very cool. Is there anything in particular, T-Rex as a holster company? We bend plastic. We're not a super advanced pioneering manufacturing company, but we are developing relationships with other companies. And is there anything we can do to help? Is there a particular thing where we need to get some more resources on a specific issue? The listeners of this podcast, is there anything that they should be particularly thinking about or pursuing? Anything that we really need to be doing to get us to that end state or that next hurdle where we can push and get some new capability?
That's a tough one. It comes to having an educated user base, but in our case, so right now we're mostly dealing with commercial off-the-shelf level of technologies and pricing. But the military and defense need for this type of technologies is going to push it out of that realm, right? So these next generation technologies I'm talking about, I'm skeptical that they're going to be accessible to civilians and the consumer simply because of price point. I'm sure the F-35 helmet is amazing. Neither you or I are ever going to have one, right? Yeah. It just is a function of price point. So with T-Rex being, focused.
There's another aspect to that too, which is not only can you justify a super expensive helmet because it's a gazillion dollar airplane and a $5 million pilot or whatever the current market value is, but also the F-35 has a gigantic power plant, so you have infinite wattage to run the thing. It's already got computers, it's already got a sensor package, it's already got data, it's already got data links. It's already in a really good position to map the surface of the Earth, and it already has a really good database of topography to line stuff up, and so they get to cheat a little bit. Like they have resources that your guy on the ground doesn't have. So that's kind of another interesting one where it's not just one-to-one where we just miniaturize this and make it cheaper. Everything has to be made cheaper, and the problems that need to get solved might even be trickier once you're down in the mud and you're actually going through bushes as opposed to having the bird's eye view of really recognizable topography.
100%. And what you asked the question, what can T-Rex do? I think you guys do a great job educating people, and I think that's the key. Is we want the end users, law enforcement, military, and just the general public, we want them to know where the state of our technology is and where the state of our adversaries' technology is, and what are the threats that we may actually face so that we can be more demanding and apply more of that upward pressure to modernize more quickly. There's a lot of places, especially in even government programs that have the funding, that they just continue to invest in antiquated technology that is pushing us farther behind.
Yeah. Well, it's an area that needs, it needs more attention. So we're happy to do what we can. And as we bump into folks who are working on stuff, it is, well, first of all, I enjoy digging into some of these cans of worms and learning more about how stuff actually works. But I do appreciate that we have this opportunity. We've known each other now for a couple of years, and just to connect some of the folks that I'm working with, some of the folks that you're working with, I think also has some value. But I love the opportunity to talk about this stuff, and this is another advantage. Even though you have clients you can't talk about, customers you can't talk about, you are still so much easier to talk to than somebody who's at Lockheed right now.
Yeah.
And that's another, I think, key distinctive between the new breed of defense contractors like Anduril. Palmer Luckey just went on the Sean Ryan show. Like, when was the last time we saw?
Yeah.
Yeah, when was the last time you saw a super high level guy from one of the primes being like, "Here's what drives me"?
And you can see the
There's a level of transparency there that's cool.
Yeah, I enjoy the passion. I haven't watched the entire podcast yet. It's like 4 hours long. But
Yeah, I haven't either.
the people we need working to make our warfighters more effective and safer and make our, the capability of the U.S. military what it needs to be, they have to be the passionate people. Like, there's so many, sort of philosophical treaties about how you get productivity out of people, and you just can't replace people who are really passionate about this type of problem. And it's a very specific, like you said, it's a very specific type of technologies that have to work together really, really well. And we just want to make sure that the resources are diverted to those people who are really passionate about solving the problem.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the work that you're doing, and it's on a bunch of levels. I appreciate that you're making training tools that do increase safety and effectiveness and lethality. I appreciate that you're allowing training in places where it doesn't otherwise go. I appreciate you're driving the technology. But I also appreciate that you're not just laser focused on a couple of contracts. Like, we saw each other at SHOT Show. You came out and visited T-Rex. Like, your willingness to work with other folks and solve other people's problems and come on podcasts and talk about this stuff. I think that's huge. I think that's highly effective for getting the work done that needs doing.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience. I think, we have to make sure that the U.S. military and the Western forces maintain superiority on the battlefield, and it's going to take a lot of us to do it, right? So we don't need to be precious and kind of secretive about what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's a very, very large ecosystem that needs to come together, and we need everybody, pushing in many, many different directions to make it all come together. So we're happy to share. We love showing our products. As you know, we're at trade shows almost every week. You'd be surprised how many military and defense-oriented trade shows there are.
There's a lot. Yeah.
But there's a lot. That's what's great about having a portable system. So again, if people are interested, we can take it wherever it needs to go. And we love showing it and helping people understand that, like, this technology is here. It's a little rough around the edges, but it is effective today. It's not a tomorrow technology. It's a today technology.
Yeah. Well, very good. Well, is there anything in particular that we haven't covered before we close? Anything in particular you'd like to make sure that you get on the record or tell to the very weird, esoteric, diverse crowd that is the T-Rex podcast listener group? There could be a guy listening to this podcast right now who is almost finished with his laser gyro improvements.
Exactly.
That solve a problem. Yeah.
We are a solutions company. We're not a technology company. I'm not trying to invent the 100-year light bulb and be the only guy who has it. So anybody who provides any piece of this ecosystem, we want to know about it. Obviously, reach out through you, reach out through our own website. But we're agnostic about which technologies, whether software or hardware, that we support. Whatever is the best, we will integrate it into this product and promote it and deploy it to customers.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing project. Like what you have now.
We have years,
stepping stones,
decades of roadmap, right? Like we're entering a new paradigm. That it's not just going to change. Obviously, the military and these type of technologies are needed in the defense space right now. They're nice to have in commercial. So a lot of this is going to be driven by the fact that it's a need in certain places. But eventually it's going to, permeate society at large. These XR and spatial computing is going to be, sort of the ultimate human-computer interface.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm excited for the future. I'm excited when the realities of defense requirements drive some of those things, because it, I think, does help you focus. It does help you focus on the absolute. We in the tech space, you talk about minimum viable product all the time, but usually that's such a mushy concept. Sometimes when it's life or death, minimum viable product gets much more defined. It's much more clear. So I think that's a fascinating place to be doing product development. But the other thing is, and this is fascinating to me, the other lesson from the war on Ukraine is that everything really needs to be democratized and decentralized significantly. That battle is not going to be won by slightly more or slightly more advanced F-35s. And the drone space demonstrates that. This is the kind of capability that needs to be handed down to a much broader base of defenders. And so a bunch of new challenges come with that, but a bunch of new opportunities come.
We're very happy to see that the emphasis being placed on the warfighter, the individual dismounted soldier. I think that's going to be a trend that you see. We're really happy to see that that's recognized as that's the place that we need to be investing, because it is, you're always going to have people in harm's way, and you want them to have a ridiculous level of capability and a ridiculous level of survivability, and that comes from a superhuman understanding of everything that's happening in that environment around them, and this is the technology that can bring that to them.
Yeah.
And you're hearing more talk about it, which is great.
Yeah, I grew up, reading Tom Clancy and talking to folks who were part of the blob back at the end of the Cold War, and this idea just kind of permeated American thinking. Not entirely, but just like, we will get bigger, we will get more technologically advanced, but I firmly believe there is no technology stack tall enough that you're not going to need boots on the ground. There's no legion that's powerful enough that you can send it off, to defend the farthest realms of the empire, and you're still not going to need people at home. Like, there's
certainly for the next 50 years or so, I would say.
Yeah.
You're not going to get away from that.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see as technology develops, an emphasis on bringing more manufacturing here. I think it's going to be a little bit of a long march to do that, but I think that there will be some immediate opportunities. Like there is going to be an opportunity for some more speed and some more agility once stuff is happening closer to home. And so I think it's going to be a fun few years in this particular area.
Certainly reinvigorating, right? I do believe that we are at the very beginning of a transition of how we think about, how we procure the essential technologies and infrastructure that we need.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Gabe, for coming on the show, Gage, and telling us a little bit more about the product. I'm looking forward to seeing version 2, and this time I think I'd love to dive a little deeper and cover whatever we're allowed to in a video.
Yeah, I'd love to get your guys' perspective on the new system, especially we try to make it so that it is indistinguishable from operating real firearms. I think we're really, really close. But we'd love to get your guys' opinions, because y'all know how to shoot.
We got some really good guys. In fact, earlier today we ran a little mini tactical games out at the range, and so a lot of people are getting a lot better at the stuff that they're doing. So yeah, we'll have some very experienced shooters for you next time you come around, and we'll. I think that hallway is a pretty good, with the conference room at the end with the windows. Like, I think that is a pretty good
bigger space than that. Yeah, we'll want to go in a large environment.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll either we'll do the full warehouse downstairs, or I have a bigger building in mind we could do something at. So that'll be good.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. All right. Well, thank you so much, and thank everyone for listening. This is a fascinating opportunity, and I appreciate everything that Overmatch is doing to mature some of these technologies. and really create an opportunity. It is sort of a horse and cart, chicken egg problem. Like, do you wait for the technology to be mature, or do you really work very hard to have a fantastic and incredibly usable demo? Because that is an interesting question for any business startup, anybody who's trying to really develop solutions. Yeah. So I appreciate that you're doing the hard work up front, even though
putting it in users' hands quickly, because ultimately the user's going to tell you the direction it needs to evolve, and it's very very hard to predict what you actually need to invest in if you're not getting real world end user feedback.
Exactly. I'm aware of a couple of other training companies and entertainment companies that are sitting back and waiting for the technology. And when it's ripe, they will save a huge amount of development work. But I think that they'll find that you're already there. You have already moved into the space. You've already learned the lessons. You've already developed the customers and the trust.
Disruption always comes from the small guys. It just does.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing. I can't wait to see what the next, well, it's always 3 to 5 years, what the next 3 to 5 years will hold.